Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, I got a fun and exciting video for you guys today because Azahar 2125 is officially out for everyone, bringing in a ton of changes, a ton of new platforms, as well as just some fixes around the edges, as well as Vulkan support and improved shader caching. And that's absolutely going to be a massive improvement from the previous Azahar. Some of the actual features that I'm showing you here have been available in unstable night laser preview builds, but now this is all going to be on the mainline branch, and if you haven't upgraded yet, you 100% owe it to yourself to do so, because this is so much better 3DS emulation than we had before. Before you get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, got a Patreon link down below as well. And basically in every 3DS emulation video, I like to say I enjoy playing 3DS in emulation way more than I do on the handheld outside of the 3D screen. It's just one of those things, these games absolutely excel when they are played on a big television with some internal rendering resolution bumps. Especially if you have an OLED TV, they just look absolutely stunning. And now with all of the improvements in Azahar 2125, 3DS emulation is just getting better. And that is why retro gaming is making a comeback, and yes, I am calling the 3DS retro at this point in time, just because it has those vibes to me, but you guys can debate that in the comment section. But again, if you haven't updated Azahar recently, you definitely want to check this one out. The number one thing is going to be the sync cache as far as actually caching some of the calls to the GPU are concerned. You may have noticed in previous versions of Azahar you end up getting stutters when it's actually compiling the shader cache in the background. That is going to be much improved, and now you can actually transport that shader cache from one installation to another to make sure it's 100% ready to go before you play. Now you'll have to find those shader caches, that's up to you, but it is a really nice thing, and honestly, even without it turned on, I noticed that the caching is much faster in Azahar 2125. I think that's the number one quote-unquote complaint I get when it comes to modern emulation, the stutters and kind of dips in frame rate when the shader's actually caching in the background. If you have a fast enough system, you can kind of bypass that, but it's one of those things. This will definitely improve a lot. So you'll see here, if you pop over to GitHub, you can get the most recent version of Azahar, and it's going to be 100% mainline branch. And as of a few versions ago in the non-stable nightlies, you could install this to RetroArch as well, and now that's going to be available for you as a core in RetroArch to download. I think that's going to make a lot of people happy, because even though I'm not really a RetroArch user, I use everything standalone if it's available. That's just how I like to do things. So many of you do enjoy RetroArch, and now you're going to be able to pop in your 3DS emulation there, as far as Azahar is concerned at least, and absolutely have a good time. That'll definitely be a big improvement for some emulation front ends as well. But you tell me down below in the comments, RetroArch user or standalone emulation user? For me, I just like all my emulators in a folder because I don't really run front ends all that much, but it's one of those things I totally get a ton of people like them, so now you're definitely going to be benefiting from that. As we move into Donkey Kong Country Returns, again, this is performing a lot better than the last time I took a look at this game, maybe like 8 or so months ago, and in my experience on my system, which is an i9-12900K with a 3080 Ti and 64GB of DDR5 RAM, I didn't really have any issues in its performance whatsoever. So there's going to be a massive list of improvements here. I'm just going to go over some of the top note stuff, the things that you're actually going to notice in your day-to-day gameplay sessions, because some of them are absolutely dramatic. You will see here the implementation of a disk shader cache for the Vulkan renderer, and I do prefer Vulkan over anything else as far as Azahar is concerned. And you will see again the cache files can also be copied between your own devices to benefit from the reduced stutter. What that really means is it can be benefited from copying it from somebody else's folder before you play the game. So I'd imagine sometime soon you're probably going to start seeing some cache repositories out there, so when you want to sit down and play a 3DS game, you can deal with it that way. Just remember, you have to own the game, you got to play these things on the up and up. But honestly, that shader cache alone and the new improvements in the Vulkan renderer and even some of the texture filtering added back in now that they're stable make this version a must upgrade in and of itself, outside of the fact that there is a ton of other stuff, and outside of the fact that I completely whiffed this shot with the yarn ball basically 3 times. That's what happens when you're playing on computer with an Xbox Series X controller. It has a completely different feel than something like a 3DS pad. But let's go into the first of 2 soundtrack samples. You can hear how Luigi's Mansion sounds and also see the screen cadence of the motion. Because while it might not be perfect, Azahar 2125 runs the game better than I've ever seen it run in 3DS emulation, so go ahead and listen and watch, and I'll be right back with more.
No?
I mean, you can definitely tell there is still a little bit of stutter in Luigi's Mansion, but last time I took a look at this, the stutter was way more of an epidemic. Now it is kind of just a small irritation. And again, Azahar emulation and 3DS emulation in and of itself is not a complete thing. It is still in active development, so not every single game is going to work 100% perfectly. And that stutter there doesn't really matter if you have it set to 4K like I do here, or if you're at the internal rendering resolution, it still seems to happen at least the first time you want to play the game. But this is one where having a higher system spec is definitely going to benefit you, because even though 3DS emulation doesn't require the most impressive computer ever made, you don't want to throw a potato at this one. Even to duct tape potatoes together, it is going to run a little bit slow, but if you have a decent system, you should be fine. Even something like the Steam Deck is going to emulate basically the majority of the 3DS library, and you will be perfectly fine. And if you want an Azahar tutorial for Steam Deck, leave me a comment down below, because last time I did this Steam Deck 3DS emulation tutorial, it's one of those things, I think the emulator was actually a previous version that wasn't even Azahar, but I haven't really talked about Steam Deck in a minute. Now going back to the improvements here, you're going to see the shader and pipeline compilation tasks are now handled by separate workers, basically bringing in parallelism and slightly reducing the stutter, and that is definitely something I saw all the way across the board, and I did not use any shader compilation or any caches as far as getting them to run before I executed the game is concerned. So what you're seeing on my system here and the footage is just me throwing the game at a brand new installation of Azahar with no benefit whatsoever. Now again, I have a pretty decent system here for editing, but it's one of those things I wanted to give you guys the raw unfiltered look of what it looks like just to run a game without doing anything in advance, so try to improve the process so if you actually get some shader caches installed before you play these games, will get an even better experience. And I think that is going to be kind of the new frontier for stuff like Azahar and 3DS emulation, into your archives of these caches. That way you can just drop them in before you start playing, because it does make a fundamental difference. And if you're not sure what the shader cache is, basically they have to transpose calls to a modern GPU compared to what would have been in the 3DS, so that the graphics can render correctly, and those need to compile before they're able to display. So sometimes you do end up with a hitch while that compilation finishes up. You'll also see here in the Vulkan renderer, it's going to slightly reduce memory usage, so if you're sitting on a GPU with not a lot of VRAM on it, it should actually give you a couple improvements. Though you will see every once in a while there are still some visual glitches in some games. Kirby here, the menu actually pops up from the background and basically doubles itself up. That could just be an issue with Vulkan, because I've only been using Vulkan for this video, but again, the entire point here is that Azahar emulation, 3DS emulation is still a moving target. It is still in development, so as long as you don't expect perfection, you won't be disappointed, but if you expect massive improvements compared to the last version of Azahar you ran, you will definitely get them here. Let's go into the second of two soundtrack samples, because the music in Kirby 10 out of 10, and I'll be right back with just a little bit more news. I mean, Kirby Triple Deluxe has such good music, and it sounds incredible here coming out of Azahar, and that really is what matters. So it's one of those things, 3DS emulation keeps getting more and more mature, and now it's available in something like RetroArch. Now you're going to have the Vulkan renderer, you're going to have all of the asynchronous shader caching, you're going to be able to actually transport a cache into a new version of Azahar, so you can bypass all of the stuttering when it actually compiles those caches for your GPU. You're going to get lower memory usage, better improved performance, and just better compatibility in games. That absolutely 100% makes a huge difference. So I left a link in the description below to the GitHub page. You can go ahead and grab whatever version you want there. Just be aware that when you actually download it, you have to click a tab to see more builds, especially if you want the Windows one, because by default it is obscured, because there are so many different versions now across Linux, across Android, across stuff like Windows as well as Mac, and that is great. This thing has basically unlimited compatibility now, so that will definitely make a lot of people happy. But short of that, we're done. Definitely check this release out, and if you don't feel like updating, trust me, take the time. It takes all about a minute, and you're going to have a much better time. But I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.